Hey Corey.
Hello, Steve. How are you?
Okay, just a little I don't know, disoriented. It's just I haven't had that much what do you call it? I don't have a clear set of priorities in terms of what I'm most behind on and what I need and where to start. I guess
Yeah,
that's the main thing. It's post-hurricane season, I guess. How are you?
doing well. I kind of feel the exact same way. Trying to keep my priorities straight and get everything straightened out. But
Yeah. There are things I was going to do as soon as I got back from my FEMA job, and I'm just getting around to some of them now. So that's the way it goes. But anyway, so we got like 28 people signed up, or a little maybe more than that by now.
I think there were 30 when I just checked a few minutes ago. I actually resent out the invite to all the persons who registered because it was
Hmm.
not on my calendar. And I wondered if that might have happened because of the rescheduling. It didn't update on my calendar for some reason. So I made sure that I sent a email directly from Zoom to the registration registrants,
Okay.
um, separate from the Mailchimp stuff. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, it didn't show up on my calendar either. I don't know why. I hope Ron got it. I haven't been in contact with Ron in the last few days.
he was registered, so I didn't see
Okay.
his name on there.
You did see his name on there, right? I mean, the caption
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
up
I
at the.
did. Yeah, yep, it
Okay.
was there. So he
Okay.
even got the email this afternoon that I sent. So
Okay. Yeah, it's just kind of like I'm at the where was I phase, after October was so crazy. And who knows what's going to happen after election day.
it'll be just as crazy as it always is.
Yeah,
So,
I hope it doesn't get any crazier than that. We've only got a handful so far, so we'll probably wait until we get about 10 or 12 and then we can get started. I'm going to put some questions I wrote into the chat box. I should have shared them with Ron already, but I haven't.
you may want to wait until he gets here, though. Otherwise, he won't be able to see them in the chat.
Okay. I've got to reformat my chat box. It comes in like letters that are this high and like only 2 or 3 words per line. Now I don't know where it is. Oh, here it is. just to mark time, and it's kind of related to planners and politics. I have a favorite story, and it takes about, I guess, 5 minutes. We had a planners walking tour of the downtown Cookeville, Tennessee, and the planner for Cookeville had to start out in City Hall, and she saw the city manager go by, so she grabbed him. And while we were waiting for the walking tour to start, she introduced him to us. And he said, "Wait a minute, this is a room full of planners?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, you got to explain to me what happened last night. We had been working on economic development to get a Lowe's down at the interchange for ever. All of our ducks were in a row. We took it to the planning commission, and the planning commission said they wanted the vista that the hill was represented. They didn't want the Lowe's to mess it up. What the hell is going on with you people?" And I'll just throw that out to get started while we wait for Ron. How do you answer that? Don't answer them all at once. I just whether planners are out of touch with economics and overly concerned with aesthetics, or the planners not properly trained, or is there a dialogue issue? I don't know. That happened like 30 years ago, and it's been bothering me ever since. Well, we don't have Ron yet, but I said we'd start when we have 10 people, and we do.
Steve, this is Owen. I have something I want to share with you because I know you're particularly interested in this.
Yes, sir.
I had this Tuesday my first meeting with an accreditation group from APA. Since we've been on this topic about whether we overemphasize or adequately respect the private practice aspects of APA. And on this accreditation team that was at UCF, we had a faculty member from FSU who is AICP. We had someone who is in the private practice division. I'd have to find her card. I personally did not know her, who's FAICP. And we had a faculty member from Virginia Commonwealth, and he appears to teach planning, but is not AICP. And we chatted a little bit about whether, the organization adequately reflected the viewpoints of what a private practitioner might really want to know about or understand as part of his, his or her academic training. And there was a strong sense in the conversation, that maybe we did need as a professional field to sort of expand the view and the emphasis that we've created. Wanted to share that with you. Maybe this is not the appropriate time to do that.
It may be an appropriate time. That the way conversations are structured, they're supposed to be more like a round table than somebody speaking and then waiting for Q&A. So, and we've got a lot of people on here. We could start introducing each other while we wait for Ron, and we could even start talking about, at least from our shared perspective, or each of us introduce a little bit of what they wish planners would what do politicians need to know about us and what we do, and what they how can we get them to understand us better than better than the status quo? You know, how can we improve better lines of communication? So I will say, first of all, I'm Steve Bucknell. I'm the PPD chair. And, my question is, for Ron is, what the politicians, what should they know that they don't know about us? Put it that way. And I'll pass it over to Jeff on my left, right on the screen. You can introduce yourself.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Ray. I am in Nebraska, working in Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Dakota, and both Dakotas and Wyoming. So here, as also the chair of the Nebraska State APA Legislative Committee, we've been wrestling with some of that same type of question and issue. And I think where we've come down is that we want the politicians to know that as planners, we are out there and have the ear of the people and the future of the state in mind as we practice our profession, and that we are a resource for them to come to for legislation, for opinions, and so forth. But most of them don't even understand what planning is, and we have to start at ground zero and explain what that is. And so as their legislative session starts back up in January, we have a kickoff meeting with them as they start introducing bills. There was a long line of groups lined up to do breakfasts with them. So we decided to go at the other end of the day, and we're calling it Pints for Planners. And we're going to go have a beer with them after their sessions are done in January.
Okay. Corey, why don't you introduce yourself to us? And what do you want politicians to know about planners?
Well, my name is Corey Hall. I am the Eastern Regional Manager with the Ray Highway Foundation based in Atlanta. We're a nonprofit foundation that advances innovative highway technologies with state DOTs and local governments, working to reduce our mission or achieve our mission of reduce carbon, reduce waste, and zero deaths. I think one of the things with my background of 20 years in transportation planning and working with MPOs and RPOs is to be transparent and communicative with elected officials is something that we can do, but also letting them know that we are a resource. That's so often that I have talked with elected officials, and they were just astounded by the resources that I was able to provide them and the information that I was able to provide them. Not necessarily advocating one way or another, but just giving them information, especially as a public sector planner, not advocating one way or another, just giving them information and resources. And with private sector often representing local governments, we often may need to take a neutral stance and just provide information. But I think it's information, communication, and transparency.
Okay. Well, Stephen, you're on the last guy on the top of my screen, so it's your turn.
Hello, everyone. Steve Ware. I'm suburban Philadelphia. Been a planner since 1978. My practice now is myself, sole proprietorship, normally mostly in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. I have worked in a lot of different parts of the country. And my time is split between serving as a zoning officer and things like that for municipalities, and also doing private practice. And right now I'm currently drafting a lot of form-based code ordinances and always looking for people to team up with. And I think the important thing we need to explain to the people is that we are very good listeners and we have a very diverse background. And they're always amazed when I'm sitting there as a zoning officer that I can do 25 other things and help them in 25 other ways that they're not even aware of. So we need to do a better job of marketing ourselves and our skills so they understand that we're more than just a one-trick pony kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Just going down my screen, Vince, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you want planners, politicians to know about us as planners.
Sure. Vince Cotero from Baracco and Associates in Fort Myers, Florida. Based on the comments that I've heard from our colleagues just now, I'd break it up into two areas. If part of your practice, like Steve's, is public sector, and part is private developers, landowners, so forth. I would say that I would want politicians to know that when we operate on the side of a developer or landowner, that we're really looking for options. We're not out to necessarily agree or disagree with staff at every turn, but we need to look at options, the best planning option. This is not to suggest that municipal staff aren't doing that. And most of my career has been in the public sector, but I've seen too many elected officials look at the practicing planner in the private sector as one that is just always trying to get the best deal for their client, no matter what the ramifications may be. And I wish politicians would know that there's much more to it than that. And on the public side, what Stephen just said about part of his practice that I did in a previous stint when I was in the private sector, when I was a contract planning and zoning director for a rural county in Florida, that we're also a resource and that we can help them as well. And I wish more governments would look at that. I know that there's a lot of local governments that do that, especially the ones that are spread thin if they have the money. Ones that are larger that don't need that staff, I understand that too, but there's a role too for the private sector to play as an extension of staff, and I wish more local government leaders would look at that.
Okay, I have some experience like that too. As sort of the on-call transportation planner for a number of different smaller jurisdictions. Brad, why don't you introduce yourself and what do you want politicians to know about professional planners?
Yeah, I'm Brad Streeter. I work for a firm called Sincar Consulting out of Detroit, but I've had a wide career doing things like Stephen in terms of form-based codes around the country and comprehensive plans, master plans, corridor plans, zoning work, all types of transportation work. Kind of my focus now is on complete streets and TOD. And I do work about 5 or 10% of my time is for private sector developers to get redevelopment projects approved and urban residential projects and so forth. And I think things I would want politicians maybe to know more about planning is the diversity of resources that planners can provide. I think sometimes planners have a reputation of being just planners. So they write codes or the ordinances and they do plans, but not implementation. And I think a lot of the people on this call, along with me, are very focused on getting things built, whether it be transportation systems or redevelopment or anything else, working with developers on the community side, working with developers on the private side, but bringing different coalitions together and funding and so forth to get things built. Because I think sometimes the politicians think of us as doing kind of pie in the sky plans and codes, but don't really know how to implement it. And sometimes then the elected officials think that their job is kind of solely to implement things or depend just on the private sector alone. And so I think that's a little bit of an education with the elected officials on the potential role that at least some planners can provide.
Okay. All right. Well, the next on my screen is Robert. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and what you want politicians to know?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Robert Mansfield out of Madera, California. For those who don't know where Madera is, find Yosemite National Park, head out the south gate, and you'll almost immediately be in Madera. I spent probably a little over 17 years at the county level planning level, dealing off and on directly with the elected officials. Now in the private sector, I don't interact with them as much. My scope of work is mostly helping the local guy dealing with getting their entitlements processed, interacting with the planners, as I call it, on the other side of the counter now, kind of trying to help demystify that for them. The main thing, a lot of what I envisioned answering has already been brought up by others on this call. The one thing that I would add is that the elected officials understand that planning is not necessarily always a political trump card, if you will. That planning does deal with trying to get people where they want to be, if at all possible, and should not be something that is, quote, bought, end quote, in terms of a political donation, to try and get to the front of the line type of thing.
Okay. Well, Laura, we're somehow we haven't had our speakers come yet, so I'm asking everybody to introduce themselves and tell us what you wish politicians would know about planners that they don't necessarily seem to know.
I don't know if I can answer that question, but I'm Alara Mills-Getcher. I am a consultant. I am in Northwest Florida, and I do work on both sides. I do a lot of work for local governments, and I do a fair amount of work for developers. And I do a little bit of expert witness testimony on occasion. That's more sparingly these days because my plate's pretty full. But I think my biggest wish with politicians is they would just sometimes, not just talk to you, because sometimes I don't even want to hear it. So just to be able to have that conversation, I think would be my wish.
Okay. Talk to us. That's a good
Let's listen to each other.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Kendra, tell us a little about yourself and what you wish politicians would know that they don't.
Sure. My name's Kendra Lindahl. I'm with Landform Professional Services in Minneapolis, and most of our work is in Twin Cities, although we do work in the Midwest and a number of states. And I, like many of you, work for both public and private sector. I'm focused primarily on local government on the public sector. I don't do a lot of county or state work. And the message, I guess, not to repeat what everyone else has said. So the only thing I would add is that I do think as project managers or as planners, we are excellent project managers and coalition builders. And so we're looking, I think, as a general rule for the best solution. And especially in this role where we are working on both the public and the private sector, I think we have the ability to bring different ideas forward to them to help accomplish their stated goals.
Thank you. Owen.
Good afternoon. I'll only add one comment because I think my views are very similar to those that have already been expressed. Yeah, those of you who do live and work in Florida, you particularly appreciate the complexities of Florida's law. Our regulatory environment really requires some heightened appreciation of what it means to work not just in the legal environment, but the political environment. That's front and center in almost everything we do in Florida. The one thing that distinguishes perhaps my practice, and by the way, I am the director of economic and real estate services at GAI Consultants. I'm also a faculty member at the UCF planning in the planning department. Is the principal thing that distinguishes my practice and then any of the conversations I have with my clients is about the fiscal and economic impacts of their decisions. Most of us are talking about functional and design and perhaps community benefits, certainly which include fiscal and economic, but my practice is exclusively on those dimensions, which seems to be a topic or a series of concerns that is always in the political mainstream. So my clients are not only private developers who are interacting with these political bodies, they are often the political bodies themselves. And in fact, I often work for other planners whose skills or their resources don't include that kind of work. And one thing that we haven't said explicitly in this conversation, which I think we would all agree on, is at the end of the day, if we've done our job properly, I think it was, I believe it was Vince that talked about options. Somebody talked about options. I thought it was Vince. Our work is about options. And it's not necessarily black and white, it is about options. And I would like to think that we present the same options, which has always been a trait or quality that I emphasize as I'm talking with my clients, is that I don't care if you're another planner, I don't care if you're an agency, I don't care if you're a private developer. I would like to think that the options I put on the table are virtually the same. So that I believe enhances our firm's credibility. I know it's enhanced my personal credibility, and I think that's consistent with the AICP Code of Ethics.
Okay, yeah, that kind of jumps to the next question, but we've got, let's see, Owen, I got Megan it's your turn to introduce yourself.
Last but not least. Thanks. This is one of my first one of these I've been to since joining private practice division, but I'm in Casper, Wyoming. I work for Y2 Consultants. I also came from the county government side. I was a planner for 15 years there, and now I'm still I work as the contract planner for a couple small towns here in Wyoming, and then also doing private development, assisting developers, and we're working on 3 county comprehensive land use plans right now in Wyoming. So, and I guess one thing I would want politicians to know, especially with what we're dealing with in Wyoming in the legislature right now, is that planners are not out. The majority of us are not out there to extend time or make development more cumbersome, and that we do in fact want affordable workforce housing in our state, in our communities, and that we are doing the best we can with limited resources, especially in smaller, more rural places like Wyoming.
Okay. So I guess sort of as an open question that we could talk about, and I'm sure this has happened to all of us from time to time, because what planners want and what the politicians feel obliged to do don't necessarily align. I've been in situations where I knew my client was didn't have a chance of getting approved. I mean, there were 400 people in the room who were opposed to it, and then I had the planning commission and then the county commission, trying to get reelected. So it was just a question of putting some stuff in the record so that you could go back and win a lawsuit. I mean, there was no way we were going to win. But I've also been in situations and fortunately have survived most of them where it would have been suicide to take what I would consider to be an ethical position. And especially, I think that may be a more of an affliction for public sector planners than planners in the private sector. But I'm sure that it affects all of us, especially those of us who work under contract for public agencies. And I would like to hear from different people how you've handled a situation like that when you were confronted with it, when basically you were told what your recommendation would be, you know, without regard for what the ethics or your professional knowledge might have suggested. So anybody want to go first? It's we're all friends here, and I'm not. This is not for the record. If you don't want it to be, otherwise I'll write you up. I'm going to pick on somebody if I don't get one. I think I'm going to pick on Jeff.
I'm not sure how to answer that question.
So somebody needs to mute themselves, I guess. I know that I've been in situations where I've basically been, well, the expectations were made pretty clear to me. I'll put it that way, and I behaved probably more. Not necessarily an outcome I would recommend. I also remember one time I was speaking forcefully on behalf of a position as a consultant to a planning commission, and I changed. I wouldn't say I changed my position in the middle of a sentence, but I demonstrated enough flexibility that one of the planning commissioners commended me for modifying my position on the fly. I put it that way. And he actually interrupted the proceedings to say, "Good job, Steve. You're keeping up with us," or something like that. So I know it happens, and I haven't always been commended for that kind of thing. But what do you do? I mean, I'll tell you, last month we had the AICP ethics officer for the conversation, and we said, how come private sector planners are always getting a bum rap as the bad guys, the black hats? And his response was that he gets a lot of calls from public sector planners who are facing this very issue, where the politicians tell them what the outcome is going to be, and then they have to reconcile that with the AICP code of ethics. So I'm not sure if you just tell everybody what they want to hear, then you're really not worth anything. And I've been told that too. I mean, I had a client, public sector client, and I said, well, listen, why don't I modify my position to match what all of these people are demanding? And he said, well, I didn't hire you to do that. I mean, you'd be worthless to me if you were to do that. So that's maybe it's too open-ended a question, but at least someone else share your experiences. I don't want to be the one that's crying all the way.
Well, this is Brad. I would say sometimes planners are good at listening, and you can get compromises from either the community or the public or your client. If you're working on the private sector, I think you need to be careful on compromising, but sometimes, everybody can dig in. I do think if I rethought my initial answer, I think one thing politicians need to understand more from planners, or something I wish the elected officials had more fortitude is not being so persuaded by just a few vocal people, to do the right thing. And I think part of the role of planners is to, like Owen said, have them look at other facts like fiscal impacts and other things, looking at options so that they're not just responding to a few, or maybe it's more than a few vocal people that are often against anything. But I think planners can also sort of listen to what the public is saying or the officials are saying and come up with some compromise to make that option a better option that's going to be more preferred to get the project approved. So,
And
I've got one if you want, Steve.
go ahead.
Actually, two really. One's a general, one's very specific. Same city manager, down in Southwest Florida in Cape Coral, where I still live. But I was community development director there for 10 years before I came to the firm a year ago that I work for now. There's a large section of the downtown that the city was working with various property owners and developers to develop, and hired several firms to come in and work on long-range plans. And the property owner, for one piece, wanted to sell as soon as he could, and he was very patient because the council member said, "We really hope you don't put, a gas station and a Circle K in there and all that. We really would like to see a nice development. We'd like to see some nice multifamily, maybe a mixed use with retail and so forth." And that's what they're developing now. He sold it to a developer that came up with a plan that made everybody happy. But before he sold it, there was a road about 100 feet in length going right through the middle of the property, and the property was all vacant. And he was trying to get as many entitlements as he possibly could. So he applied for a vacation of the roadway. And I told my staff in planning, I said, when any application comes in for any new development there other than a single family building permit or something like that, I need to know about it. And they did, because the boss wanted to be kept informed. So when the vacation application came in, they didn't tell me about it. So I had a personnel issue I had to deal with later. And they had already written a recommendation, and it was scheduled to go to the planning commission, and it went to the planning commission, but they met all the criteria. And we knew that a developer coming in was going to develop the property anyway, and really didn't mean anything. It was a very insignificant application. So when my boss found out about it and the assistant city manager, they were both very upset. They were angry with me and the staff. And my boss and I had a talk, and he was so upset, he was like hyperventilating almost. And I said, "Look, John, this is the situation here, and it's not going to be an issue. Plus, they met all the criteria. I'd be surprised, it's quasi-judicial, but I'd be surprised if the city council turns it down." So he said, "Well, you have to change your opinion." And I said, "Well, I'm not doing that. That's absolutely crazy, and it's already written. Even if it wasn't written, I would have had a hard time professionally doing that." So he said, "I need options then," just like I said a few minutes ago. And I said, "Well, you could underline the word you." I said, "You could tell the planning board, planning commission, and the county, the city council, excuse me, that you believe that, we had to process this. We have no right to hold up an application in accordance with state law, but you believe that it could be viewed as premature because there's no development plan." So that's what he did, but the planning commission couldn't care less, and they unanimously recommended approval, and the city council said, "Don't even bother with that argument. It's an insignificant application. It's needed," and they approved it unanimously as well by a vote of 8-0. So my boss and I had another talk later on, and I said it really wasn't worth it in this sense. I go, if it was something a lot more serious, we could have talked about an alternative, but you know, we were able to work it out. Now, I had another problem on my hands because my staff was, let's just say, forgetful of my intent about notifying me, and then I could have talked it through with the boss and gotten him situated before we wrote the recommendation. And I assured him that we would not have recommended denial even if I knew about it up front, because it met all the criteria in the code. It was a slam dunk, and he felt better about that. So we were okay on it, but that was a little touch and go there for a while.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else have a situation where they were told to change a recommendation or an opinion and they just didn't feel like they could do it? Or they did and they wish they hadn't? I don't know.
Yeah, I'll share one, and the city shall remain nameless. I won't be as specific as Vince. I represent the city. The city's developing a project in conjunction with a developer. Substantial amounts of private capital. Developer has shared his vision, which I have no opinion on. He shared his financial information, which I have a lot of opinions on. And in fact, I agree with every representation that the private interest has offered up as indicative of what this project wants to do and how it will yield money back to the city. The city's chief financial officer basically suggested that I had been working for the private developer. And I explained in multiple settings that we have all been in agreement for months, actually at this point, probably years, about what the content of the program should be and what the likely yield of this program would be to the city. And she's come into some conflict with the sitting commission members, the elected officials, and I'm in the middle as the potential, spokesman for the private developer when I'm actually been hired by the city to represent its interests. So very, very difficult, very uncomfortable, if not difficult position to be in. I think we can all appreciate being pulled in different directions. And now Ron's here, so I'll be quiet. Thank you, Ron.
Okay.
Well, hello.
Ron, we're here.
Yeah.
So we've all introduced ourselves and we've been, I've got a list I could share with you later of what each of us as planners wish politicians knew about us as planners. And if I was going to sum it up, is that planners have more background and resource information available that sort of, I guess, to fill in the bigger picture. And we're not necessarily just living in the moment. I think that would, I don't know if that's a fair representation of what everyone was saying, but that's the impression that I got from throwing it around. And then we were telling stories, experiences about when we felt pressured to change an opinion that we had as planners in order to align better with the political aspect of a decision as conveyed by an elected official. So
I've been on both sides of that. So I apologize if I'm a little late. I had a call from a local reporter. It's a call that you long to get, perhaps, if you're a planner or a person in a political position. This was a local reporter telling me that Chattanooga had been selected by Condé Nast, the publishing company, as I don't know where we fall in the list, but is among the friendliest cities in the country. And I said, well, you know, I don't know how they calculate that, but I'll certainly take it. And that's the sort of thing we hoped to achieve years ago when we started remodeling Chattanooga and trying to transform it from the dirtiest city in America to one where people are not embarrassed to come and are happy to live here and all of that. So I had to spend some time talking to that reporter. So you forgive me, if you will, for being late on this call. But I just really
it's not a situation. If you're being chosen as a friendly city, that's not the right time to say buzz off. I've got another call.
Yeah, right. I don't have time to talk with you right now. I told him I'll wait to see his story to see how they calculated that. But it's true that when we started way back when, you know, I used to work with a woman who was very active socially in Chattanooga, and she said, you know, we really tell the same story. We're kind of like one of those things where you push a button and the recording just starts rolling and you tell the same story over and over, which is true. But I'm sorry I missed where everyone is from on this call, because I love to hear what other cities are represented in any sort of thing as this. But Stephen, I know you'll know that Chattanooga was not a happy place years ago. It was not a fun place. It was not a place that people looked at fondly or wanted to move to or whatever. We were in the top 10 of industrial cities. Our local chamber was very proud of that. Oh, we're in the top 10 of industrial cities. And finally, someone said, well, who else is in that top 10? Well, you looked at the list. Actually, I mean, I tell a story longer. There was a somewhat elderly guy that was the keeper of the list, and we went over and told him we'd like to see that list, and he was reluctant to bring it out, but he finally brought it out. And at the top of the list of most industrial cities was Flint, Michigan. Not surprising. But then Cairo, Illinois, Gary, Indiana, and you go down the list, and it was a list of Rust Belt cities that were really starting to struggle. This was 40 years ago. And we thought, well, that's not a list that we really want to be a part of. And a reporter after that asked me where I thought Chattanooga should be on that list. And it was a list of 1 to 100 cities ranked in order of importance in industrial measurements. And at the top of the list, as I said, was Flint. At the bottom of the list was Las Vegas, Nevada, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and cities like that, which at that time were really much more tourist oriented than perhaps there are even now. But the reporter said, where do you think Chattanooga should be on that list of 1 to 100? And I said, somewhere in the middle. We want to be a balanced city. And I'm not exaggerating. After that, that story came out, and that fellow who was the keeper of the list never spoke to me again for the rest of his life. He thought I had dissed the city of Chattanooga by saying that being in that top 10 list was perhaps not as important as he thought it was. So, Stephen, you know, I'm a planner, first of all, and I kind of got dragged into politics back in the 1980s. And I have known a few people who were both planners and politicians. And usually it doesn't go well because there's a clash between being a planner and being a politician. You have to sometimes make decisions that make people unhappy, including a lot of your friends in the planning profession. And while I was mayor, I had to do some things that were just more rational and reasonable than some of my planning friends thought was appropriate. But one thing that you learn when you bounce back and forth between those two measures of thought, planning and politician, is that you have to compromise. And there are a lot of people in planning who don't like to compromise, and probably fewer people in political positions. But I can remember one time having a big disagreement with someone about a service station. And they said, well, you know, it was a convenience store. And they said, well, the convenience store needs to be built right up on the sidewalk. Well, this was a chain convenience store. And they said, well, you don't understand how our business plan works. we don't like to get robbed. They said, if we build right up on the sidewalk, we have to have doors and windows on the sidewalk. Then we have to have the gas tank, gas pumps and all in the back. So we got to have another set of doors and windows. And they said, people come in the front, they rob us, or they come in the back and rob us, and they run out the front or run out the back. Anyway, the planners weren't happy with the fact that I had to let that convenience store built in a more conventional fashion. Then there are a few now that are built with that plan of being up on the sidewalk. But the balance between being a committed planner and a committed politician is sometimes difficult to achieve. So hit me with some questions.
All right. What would you, as a prominent politician, want to tell planners to do that we're not doing, or that we don't do enough of, or that we need to sort of change our approach?
Oh gosh. Things that planners do naturally, mostly, is listen. And that's, unfortunately, a lot of people in politics don't listen. So I think I really should be talking to politicians more than planners in this regard, because listening is a part of the whole planning mindset. And there are far too many people in politics who don't listen, and they're proud of it. You know, they've got their mindset and they think they speak for everybody because they got elected. When in fact, when you look at how people get elected, it's usually a very small margin that put them there. First of all, elections, and I learned this somewhat the hard way. You don't represent most of society when you get elected. You represent a few people who went to vote and a few people who voted your way, but there's still an awful lot of people out there who think differently. And so you have to have ways to listen to the community. And while I was mayor, I had I had neighborhood meetings all the time. And I would characterize them as stump the mayor. I would take questions, stump the mayor, see if you can come up with something that I can't answer. And I told them, you know, if I don't have an answer, I will make up something that sounds plausible. And you can decide whether I'm telling the truth or not. But I would encourage just a lot of listening. I was thinking of people that I knew who were planners. There was a fellow years ago who worked for one of the big foundations. And he came to Chattanooga. His name was, I think it was Larry Carroll. He's deceased now. He was killed in a helicopter crash. But a nice guy. He came to Chattanooga, and he was looking at investing in some of the foundation's money in some of the things that we were doing at the time. So I took him up on Lookout Mountain to Point Park, overlooking the city. And I was standing up there pointing out how the Civil War battles had proceeded, and I was having a good time filling in all the blanks, telling him how historic Chattanooga was and all like that. And he didn't seem terribly interested. And he was from, oh gosh, what was the foundation? The Lilly Foundation. He was from the Eli Lilly Foundation. And so I pointed to a certain place on Moccasin Bend, and I said, and there's where Captain Eli Lilly set up his 8th Indiana Battery and laid siege to the city of Chattanooga. And I looked at the guy's eyes, and he didn't flinch. He already knew the story. I mean, he came to Chattanooga knowing that. And it's true. Eli Lilly was a Civil War soldier on the Union side, and he fought in Chattanooga. And some histories written after the fact credit all the carnage and the disease and the destruction that he saw while in the Civil War with the reason he went back and started the Lilly Drug Company that, of course, now is world famous. But anyway, this guy, he was both a representative of the Lilly Foundation, and he had run for Congress earlier. And I said, how did that go? And he said, well, it was all very well. And he said, I was very proud talking about I was a city planner. And he said, finally, my handler said, don't talk about that too much. And I said, he said, why? And they said, well, they think all city planners are communists. So if you keep stressing the fact that you're a city planner, they're not going to vote for you. And he didn't get elected. And so he said his suggestion, if you wanted to get into politics as a planner, is don't mention the fact that you're a planner. I don't think that's quite a hard and fast rule, but I always was proud of the fact that I was a planner. People knew me as a planner, so I couldn't get away from it anyway. But I think it's an advantage if you have spent a good part of your career listening to people, and if you're tuned into what the community has been doing, what the community needs to do, you have a step ahead. So I was successful, and I think a lot of it was because I was a planner and had done a lot of listening in the community, knew the community, knew the good and the bad of the community, and that's something that you can never do too much in that regard.
I'm going to ask you a pretty specific question, and it's based on my relative experiences in Tennessee and Florida.
Uh-huh.
In Florida, I took a development proposal that the staff, the planners in that city had been trying to advance for over 15 years, which was a high density infill development in a small city. I'm not going to say which one it is out of deference to in case something I say right now might not be taken kindly in that city. But I was coached by the planning department. They showed me the comprehensive plan. They showed me how this development would advance the comprehensive plan, infill 6 or 8 units per acre in an old downtown. And I stood up there, I said my lines just like the staff wanted me to. And I was standing in front of the planning commission. And the first question was, well, this is across the street from the high school. Where are they gonna park on Friday night? That was the first question. And another question was walkable. You can't walk to a furniture store. And they were just completely out of sync. So I did my little shuffle and jive, and I got the thing to a point where I had never appeared before anyway. The point is, you're talking to a bunch of people on a planning commission who don't know anything about planning.
Right.
The city commission was all in. As soon as we went to the city commission for the rezoning, they said, any conditions that were imposed by the planning commission, we apologize for them. We just want to approve this thing. But what I'm asking you, Ron, as an elected official in Tennessee and a professional planner, you and I know that there's mandatory training required by Tennessee statute that everyone on a planning commission has to know something about planning. And what's been your experience with that? And I'm going to ask you if you would recommend it or not to places like Florida that don't have that requirement.
Well, when I got into planning, there was a fellow named Harold Miller who was known throughout the planning profession at the time. And this was when American Planning Association, American Society of Planning Officials were 2 different organizations. It was way back when, before there was any such thing as AICP or any of that. But he was a well-trained and well-known planner, and he insisted that people who were on planning commissions knew they must know something about planning. He even produced a primer, a little booklet, which I probably still have copies of it around here somewhere, called it was The Planning Profession, and it had all sorts of information in there about what it meant to be a planner, kind of questions that come up, and what you needed to know, and that was a very valuable thing. And we gave it out for years to people who served on the planning commission. I really wish they did more of that nowadays. I think having exposure to planning and the questions that come up and the skills that are in play on planning questions is absolutely essential. It always bothered me when one of the local governments had the right to name somebody to the planning commission, and they would throw anybody in there, just let them go to the meeting, and they would sit there and they would either be silent or they wouldn't have anything worthwhile to engage the community with. So I think it's very important. And I'm glad that Tennessee does that now, that they require a certain amount of planning instruction, if you will, every year to maintain your qualifications as a member of a planning commission, not just planning staff. And I think it pays dividends. So put me on the positive side of that question. The thing that worries me sometimes is the number of professionals that get named there. I'm not picking on architects or civil engineers, but they'll get on that panel and they start seeing it as a way to steer work their way somehow. And they might understand planning, but they're looking at the profit motive more than perhaps planning in the broad sense of what it does for the community. I had a meeting yesterday with a local reporter, and I was in the presence of some of our planning staff. And it's the first time I had met her, and she was their new urban affairs writer. And I said, well, I have to tell you, I think one thing that we have to be careful about is developers. And well, I looked around, there was a horrified look on some of the planners' faces in the room. And I said, no, developers, the profit motive doesn't always square well with what's best for the community. And that is something that I worry about when planners, when someone from the skills that are required to build and to develop important parts of the city become more profit oriented than they are working on the best interest of the whole community. So that requires a whole lot of discussion, and I'm sure I'm going to have some interesting discussions with that new urban writer on that factor. But having a at least somewhat knowledgeable group on the planning commission itself, I think, is essential. And I wound around, but that to say, someone who shows up who has no idea what they're doing, they're just there because they want to put it on their resume that they were served on the planning commission, and they aren't willing to sit down and do the work, figure out what they're doing and how it all fits together in the weave of the community. They shouldn't be there. So that's my thinking on it.
Well, I mean, I'm a biased questioner on this. I mean, I feel pretty strongly, and in a sense, I apologize for asking you a loaded question, because that was the answer I was looking for. But I want to also, while I'm plugging Tennessee, mention that the law has an opt-out provision. If you don't want your county, your government to be subject to that law, all you have to do is say, I don't want it. And no, as far as I know, very few governments opt out. They don't. Very few of them will voluntarily relinquish this responsibility or requirement that is imposed by the statute. So
it's not an onerous thing, It's and anyone who wants to serve in a civic capacity should be willing to sit down for a little while. Once in a while, and learn about this responsibility that they've been assigned to. If they aren't willing to do that, they really shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And I don't know of any that have really opted out that I would think were important in any fashion.
Well, thank you. Anyway, that's I got my soapbox there, and I got Ron to agree with me, so I'm happy. But I'd like to, before we close, and see if there are other questions or concerns that people have for Ron, now that we now that we have him here with us. If
Go
not,
out there and go run for office. That's my suggestion.
Well, this is
I-
Brad Strader, Ron, and I want to thank you for joining us. So I've worked with two firms, LSL Planning, that worked with the regional Chamber of Commerce there in Chattanooga on the sustainability grant that I think the city won, and helping do some of the things you started out with. And then MKSK, a firm that I worked with, worked on the downtown plan and so forth. So I've always been, in the firms I work with, always impressed with the people of Chattanooga, their commitment to Chattanooga, and the turnaround. So congratulations to you and everybody else there. Really enjoy Chattanooga. So
Thank you. I love to hear that sort of thing. And I can tell you, we earned that title of dirtiest city in America. I was here at the time. The city, you could smell the city outside the city. You could tell when you were getting into Chattanooga simply because you could smell it. It was nasty. And it wasn't just air, it was water pollution, it was everything. So yeah, we were in the top 10 of industrial cities, but that was not a comfortable place to be. We had a thriving tuberculosis and respiratory disease hospital, and those doctors were doing great. But you have to give up something in order to be the kind of city that we wanted to be, kind of city that we are now. So that hospital closed a few years ago, and we weren't sorry to see it go.
Well, on behalf of the Private Practice Division, I would like to announce that our next conversation will be on December 13th. And that will be our final conversation because of we typically have the conversations late in the month, and late in November, late in December are not good for people. So we're going to have our next one on December 13th, and we've recruited Jason Jordan, APA policy director, to talk about how private practice planners can help with the initiative that the APA has undertaken called the Housing Supply Accelerator, which should deal with a problem on the national level that planners are directly involved with. So mark your calendars, stay tuned. December 13th, 3 o'clock. It's a Friday. And we look forward to seeing you there. And that'll wrap it up for the year. And now, starting next year, in 2025, Brad, as our professional development chair, will be organizing some webinars, which would be a little lengthier and maybe a little less roundtable and a little more instructional than the conversations have been. And we're planning to do 3 or 4 of those next year for CM credits. So stay tuned for more news about that. Thank you for joining us. Thanks, Ron. Congratulations. Your
friendliest city, remember, friendliest.
Yeah, your doctor's note has been approved, and you are excused from earlier participation. And I'm glad that you could catch up with us. And your friendliness to us is a reflection of the award that Chattanooga has received. So thank you.
I look forward to being a part of the conversations in the future.
Okay.
When you have other people joining us.
Yeah. And you were on the one about ethics where that came up too. So
right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you all, and we'll see you in about 5 weeks.
Very good. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.